Happy New Year! To kick off the year, I would like to do pretty much just what I did last year this time, which is to look back on the year ahead spread that I laid out last year after reflecting on the prior year's spread. So at the time that I shuffled and laid out these cards for this year, which I'll show momentarily, I didn't really, as I mentioned at the time, didn't really get into it too much. I didn't really look at them too closely. Pretty much in the last few years when I have done this spread, I really just lay the cards out and maybe get a glance at that bird's eye view, but then I very quickly take a photo and pack everything up and reshuffle the deck and put it away and go about my business and not dwell on it too much. As the year progresses, I'll look back to the photo and check out the card that relates to the season that I find myself in. Because otherwise, as I've said several times, I really don't care to read tarot predictively. I like to use this more as a meditative tool, as a way of getting out of my head and just being able to like throw my thoughts down in the form of these cards and just to kind of help me sort out my shit from there. Just unpacking situations, getting advice on what to do. Otherwise, the year ahead spread isn't something that I've done many years. It's really only been in the last few, because when I was first learning tarot, I remember laying one out and I did 12 cards for the 12 months of the year, as many people do. And I definitely reflected on that at the time, assessed what it might mean as the year went forward. But at that time, I was just learning tarot, and it was just more like an exercise and then moving on to the next thing. I was trying all of the things at that point, and I found that the year ahead spread in that moment wasn't really resonating with me. I didn't like the feeling of staring down a month, several months in the future, and if it seemed like it could be negative, already anticipating what hardship that could be. I totally understand and appreciate how that could be helpful for planning purposes. No one likes to be caught off guard, but that being said, like, it's very easy for me anyway to jump to conclusions and maybe make a mountain out of a molehill and maybe make something more serious than what it actually ends up being. And some things are just out of our control, but there's also a lot that is in our control. And so I guess I just felt like, well, based on the decisions that I'm making, that could change any one of these cards going forward. So that's where I kind of find myself back at now. And actually, for this past year, like, I was definitely looking back at this spread and reflecting, but I found myself less into it and internalizing it a lot less than I had the 2 years prior. Because I think those 2 years prior, I was probably kicking it off about the time that I was definitely going through acute grief, and in a state like that where you feel like you've got nothing else to lose, it's not so bad throwing down cards and seeing something that might seem negative in the future, because it's like, all right, throw it at me, bring it on, because I've already dealt with a lot. So, hey, again, what do I have to lose at this point? So I felt a little like scrappier and less afraid, actually, under those circumstances, where I think over the course of this last year, I was kind of feeling like, well, I've been healing a lot from that, trying to be more in the light and active and in the now. And so that made me less eager about looking ahead, really. I think because I was being more proactive this year and I was sort of more passively letting life happen to me those prior years. And this past year, I was really trying to step it up and take more initiative. And I think that it did, in fact, change the course of certain things. So while I still think the cards that I'll discuss today did capture certain energies of the year, it just wasn't as deeply resonant as I had felt it to be before. So that being said, this year, I'm not going to be laying out the whole thing. I will choose my thematic card for the year, as I do with Kim Kranz's Wild Unknown Archetypes Oracle. And then drawing from the Light Seers Tarot, the current card for my current state and maybe one more for the next thing up ahead, and not getting much more predictive than that, because again, just not super comfortable within that realm of prediction, not least of which because I do think that those courses can change. And of course, that would probably be an argument for doing the year ahead spread. And if you see a card that you're not pleased with, then it gives you that heads up, and then you can already make the change that can avoid that outcome, right? So of course, that is a perfectly great reason for doing this. So I'm not making a statement on this spread in general and whether we should or should not do it, like, collectively. I'm speaking for myself and just rolling in my practice with what is suiting me at any given time. And I know that you all probably identify with that. There are certain practices that we might do on a daily or weekly or monthly or annual basis that kind of have their season. And then maybe our interest in that wanes and their usefulness to us wanes. But then who knows, in the future it can cycle right back. So I have definitely enjoyed this practice enough to still want to keep one foot in it. I'm just, again, going to try it in this modified way where I'm actually not drawing all the cards ahead, but rather as the time approaches. And then it gives me something to think about more in the present, because again, that's where I'm at right now. I'm trying not to think too far ahead. And I'm also in a place where I feel like I'm clinging less to the past, as, bereavement certainly had me doing for at least a couple of years there. So anyways, moving on to this, I also have my 2024 Passion Planner on hand. This is my planner of choice. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, I'm not going to get into all the details of what it contains. You can look that up on the website and find out what makes this such a wonderful thing. First of all, I really love its flexibility. It's great, really, really solid. And it comes in 3 different sizes, so you can have small, medium, or large. Hey, this is the medium one. But anyways, at the end of every month, there is a monthly reflection, and it is basically the same set of questions every month. But I was not doing those reflections in tandem with this exercise, this Wheel of the Year, or rather, year ahead spread. I called it Wheel of the Year because that's what I follow for choosing my cards. And again, I'll get to that in a second. But I wasn't looking at the card as I'm writing the reflection. So I thought this would be interesting to refer back to what I did have to say about that month, as far as what was the overall feeling an observation I had about that time, independent of this. So it's interesting to me now, this exercise of comparing what my lived experience left me with and then what the cards had to say at that time. So getting to it. Okay, I don't have the best top-down situation going on here, but we'll work with it. Okay, so starting with my thematic card for the year from the Archetypes deck, I had drawn the sword, and it actually did come about at this sort of tilt, just slightly going forward. And so I see leaning into the right with the circular deck is generally, a more active energy, like calling me to lean into this, and this being a clarity, a decisiveness. And that is absolutely something that last year at this time I was seeking, because it was kind of time to cut through the mental and emotional fog of my emotions and just get living again and make some decisions as to the course of my future. What was I going to focus on? Because I find myself split among different things, personally and professionally. And so it just really felt like a shit or get off the pot time. So I loved getting this, and was also an immediate impression for me, even though I didn't reflect on this too much when I first laid it out. I could not help but notice the visual of this sword in parallel with the Queen of Swords sword here and Justice's sword here. that just really, really stood out and emphasized for me, like, okay, this is going to be something I'm definitely going to have cause to revisit through the year and try to like keep that course going for myself. So anyways, as I mentioned, I do my year ahead spread based on Wheel of the Year. Now that is loosely based, as I've also explained in previous videos when I've shared this. I don't, it's loosely based on the 8 Sabbats, but I'm not looking at it specifically during those celebration days. It's really just capturing the essence of the earlier and later parts of each season. So this is kind of a carryover of the energy from Yule, the winter solstice from last year, and where I am currently as we roll into Imbolc, but really just representing like the latter part of winter and accordingly going forward, early, late spring, early, late summer, and then going into the autumn. And then for me, this last card is also capturing the energies of approaching that solstice. So anyway, for last January, I would have found myself at this point, and I feel that it did capture how I felt at that time, where I just felt like I needed to kind of latch onto what was mine, reclaim what was mine, my talents, my power, still wanting to be there for others, of course, and giving of myself, but just trying to get my ducks in a row. I just kind of let myself, again, be very passive for a time and got scattered and whatnot. And so this was like a pulling together of those resources, putting it in that coin purse and holding it close to my heart and being determined to keep holding on to it throughout the year, whatever life threw at me and whatever my duties to others were. It wasn't to be selfish or greedy with my time and resources, just to not forget about my needs and goals in the process, right? So if I'm looking at that early part of the year, going to my planner for what I had written last January in reflection, one of the questions is, how are you different between this past month and the month before it? And that's a specific question that I'm going to be referring to as necessary through this. But I said, as far as how I felt last January versus the previous December, just more energized and proactively focused on doing what makes me tick, a happier, more excited outlook on life and my potential, finding myself again. And so I really did feel that in this spirit of just, who was I and how to hold on to that. So then going into the later part of the year, it was like, all right, so how do I do that? In the spirit of decisiveness and getting clarity on things, it was time to finally stare down all those possibilities that were in front of me. And this being in the cups realm, the things that mean something to me that would really come from the heart, be at the core of who I am and what I wanted to pour my self into. And so I can get many different interpretations of a 7 of Cups generally, but this time around, I definitely saw it as all those opportunities at my disposal, and I just needed to get that clarity and just pick one. Pick one or two, and just run with it. And I do recall at the time listing out the more immediate projects at hand that I wanted to accomplish through the year, and then just focusing on one to just get done. So then it was off my plate and I wasn't feeling as overwhelmed with my to-do list, and just getting clear and focused on it, and then, okay, on to the next thing. In my planner then, for roughly this time, I think I came out of January with more gusto, feeling more proactive and organized and creative and excited. And then somewhere in February, that fizzled out, which I think was carrying me already into this. And I remember, and if you saw the video, the second I laid this card down, I was like, crap. this is coming. Ten of Swords is looming on the horizon. And so I think, so this is why I can't look at any one of these as like too specific a time frame. It really is just more the flow of energy for the year. Using, again, the 8 Sabbats as like general guideposts for that, but it's not limited to that. And that's another reason why I don't like to do the 12 months. That's just too specific. What's happening in that particular time frame from the 1st to the 28th or 30th or 31st, like that's too specific, especially as the year goes on and anything can change in that time. I'm not interested in looking ahead to that degree. And I'm not looking for specific predictions of anything, just more the general energies of the year. So, okay, so going into this point, I felt, myself kind of fizzling out. And honestly, I blame the editing. So that would be my editing work for others. And what a chore that has come to feel like. I think it's something that's coming less from the heart now. And I blame TarotTube for feeding my insecurities. That's right, I said it. And by this, I mean, I blame myself for allowing it and not setting the boundaries I need. So yeah, I'm not going to get into that, but if you may recall, if you have been following my channel for a time, I took a break for a couple of months because, rightly or wrongly, it's, YouTube is social media like any other social media platform. And I think generally, interacting with social media too much isn't ultimately healthy, at least for me. I won't speak for you. I will speak for me. I don't think it's healthy for me. Whenever I share something publicly, I feel very insecure. And there was just, I remember feeling very, very like paranoid at going into this time and burdened, and I just didn't want to think about it anymore. I just wanted to like clear my plate of it because I was like, I don't feel this insecurity in my in-person life. And the online world, not that there aren't authentic interactions to be had there, but it does feel more virtual and more artificial to me than what I can actually interact with in person for the most part. So I just needed to kind of step away from that and get a grip on like what my feelings actually were instead of being paranoid and overanalyzing and probably just like making things up. I just needed, the mental reset that a 10 of Swords can warn of. And, among that time, then in March, I wrote, I feel more empowered and invigorated by stepping back from YouTube and editing obligations and just going with my own flow at my own pace and feeling calmer and more confident as a result. It was a break of sorts, but not as isolating and unproductive as February, or at least feeling that way. Like a proper rest to restore the gusto of January, more energized and in the world. And I feel like that's the kind of determination you see in this woman's stance. The 10 of Swords can definitely like beat us down, but then we get up and we stand strong again, perhaps more strong for it. Or stronger for it. So then rolling into, I guess this would be like early summer. This is like June-ish. 6 of Cups. So when I look at this, I always associate this with like childhood nostalgia and, but not strictly childhood. Sometimes just a coming back to who I am and may have wanted for myself in the past, and that maybe I've lost sight of, and this is kind of a coming back to that too. So anyways, one like notable event that happened during this time of year was going home to the States for a substantial amount of time, and we had, as I discussed in a previous video, a big old family trip, 17 of us, 3 generations, and it was a great time. And, it was a time to kind of shift into this focus that I had on myself and getting in my own head and, being back and really celebrating where I come from and who I'm from and what we still mean to each other and everything and the love and support that we can still offer each other. And again, also just trying to feel this sense of coming back, coming home to myself. So at that point, let's see, I'll look at a couple of these months and what I had to say. I was really fired up creatively in May, whereas I had to shift my focus in June from my endeavors to family matters. And yeah, pretty much what I already just said. That tracks. Now, what I love is that for the next month, where I had drawn this, and again, it's not reflecting specifically that month, but just that general time frame of, maybe mid to late summer. I said I stepped into my power, I think. I faced some shadow in June and have been learning from it and strengthening, getting clearer about what I want from life and myself. And I think that in a nutshell conveys what I see in this card and how I interpret it now as I look back. It was this like halfway point of the year. Okay, this was the goal at the outset. Where am I at with that? Am I on track? Do I need to be more discerning? Do I need to make some course corrections? Especially coming off a time where I was very, out of my habitat as far as being in my own home with my own resources. I always consider the US as my home, but it's not where I live my daily life. And I'm out of my element a bit, even when going back to my birthplace and being with the people I've known my entire life, because I can't focus as well on my own things. It's very distracting, first of all. It's much busier. It's a short time frame in which to have to interact with a lot of people, and they've all got their own things going on. And I always view my visits as time to I don't want to totally shelve my needs, but I want to be there for theirs. I feel like it's my time to play catch up as daughter and aunt and sibling, when I'm otherwise, trying to do my best to still be that from afar, but it isn't always as easy. And so anyways, I felt like I definitely got a bit bogged down, and maybe even resentful, a bit about that struggle that I've, had for a time, and kind of came to a head in a certain confrontation that I had with a family member, which is all resolved. All is loving and peaceful surrounding it. But I think some things, were said that kind of needed to be, and I think that was me stepping back into my own power and just getting clearer on what I need to do instead of feeling like passively beholden to anything. Without getting too specific. But then here, that's where I saw, King of Cups. This card, this court card in particular, definitely has another significance to me where I see it as someone else. But in this case, I do see it as me. With this need, this is stepping into myself. Queen of Cups is my signifier. The Cups is my suit as a Cancer, and especially when I'm working within the creative realm and very much attuned to relationships and trying to maintain, peace and support within them. Like, this is just, my watery world for sure. And so I feel like coming out of that, this was just like this return, this need for myself to get back here. And I did kind of rejuvenate, I think, and dive back into my personal projects, only to get split, which I know most people hate this Page of Cups. I'm not going to say it's my favorite, but I'm actually seeing the splitting here quite literally, also within the context of how I interpret Page of Cups, with that sort of like whimsy and imagination. Like, I needed to get this kind of emotional grip after a bit of a meltdown that happened in this phase. And once there, just kind of remember, like, get back to that purity of my intention and what I set out to achieve for myself and create from my own imagination, which is just the struggle because I feel divided. I'm here, but I'm also over there. Like, my feet are in one place maybe while my mind is in another. And so it just, that's the perpetual ongoing thing, I guess. But let's see what my reflections had to say about that. Kind of teetering on the edge of claiming my power and giving it up, because yet another editing project created an imbalance and divided my focus, depleting my stamina and joy. So I did feel split in half. So this is where, like, getting into this card, it really did feel like kind of, a reckoning, like, okay, have I gotten clear? Where do I draw the line with this stuff? Because this is something I've been going back and forth on for a while. This just kind of felt like an essential time then. Ending the year, just really staring it down, getting clear and getting objective about it. Because I think that I've continued to do certain things because I feel guilty if I don't. And I feel like, well, it's what I'm supposed to. But you know what, looking back at the end of the year, like, I, again, was spending a lot of time in the States, so there wasn't a lot of like forward motion going on at that time. But that helped me kind of reach a sense of stasis, a sense of balance where I just, was at where I was at, doing what I needed to be doing. I wasn't feeling like upset or resentful or bitter. I was just kind of surrendering to what life was asking of me, and also just seeing that demarcation of the upcoming year to 2024, 2025, and how I could just, finally make the breaks that I need to. Take this sword out and draw the lines in the sand that I need to. I got a lot better at boundaries in the last year or so, but I think that something needs to be a bit more concrete, because that's the fair thing to do, I think, for myself. Again, not looking to go retreat into a greedy, isolated place. I want to offer myself to others, but I think I do that better when I'm offering myself to myself too. And so I would like for this coming year, and we'll see what my upcoming theme card has to say about that, but I would just like to give myself a chance to flow. So let's see what I said for the end of the year. I was feeling a little less frustrated and a little more resigned, not in a settling way, just more accepting and surrendering, or at least trying to be. I felt more in flow with the season and let myself figuratively hibernate with the waning light. So I think, I was essentially feeling what I was discussing here, with just like getting in a state of balance and just kind of calm of mind and like, okay, game plan, cut out at least one thing that needs to be, and see where we go from there. And it is all trial and error. If that ends up not being, the medicine for what I need, then I pause and I reevaluate from there, right? So anyway, that was just the thought going to the end here. And I took longer doing all this than I expected to, so let's wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining me. If you do a practice like this at the start of your year, whether it's a year ahead spread or just any kind of annual reading, I'd love to hear about it. So please share below in the comments. And meanwhile, I hope that your new year is off to a good start. And I will see you when I see you, folks, hopefully before too long. Bye-bye.